lens of the students, I want you all to take a look at Arriba la Lectura. Now, you all are dual language teachers. You all probably have a lot of students in your classroom who are English language learners, and I want you to understand, coming from the classroom, I understand what your needs are as an English language learner teacher. So when you take a look at Interreading Texas and you take a look at Arriba la Lectura, you can see where they work together. They are parallel programs. The resources that you have in Interreading Texas are the same resources that you have in Arriba la Lectura, except for the fact that there are more resources in Arriba la Lectura that connect to our Spanish students. Okay, so let's take a look at it. We're going to go through a very, I know that as being a dual language teacher, you're wondering, well, how come we don't have those same resources? But actually we do. Now with Interreading Texas, we do have those same resources. They're not really translated, it's more like a translanguaging. That means we get to teach the English language arts in a Spanish, with a Spanish mindset. So let's take a look at the people who contributed to Interreading Texas Arriba la Lectura. We're going to talk about Dr. Alma Florada and Isabel Campoy. These two people are very, they write a lot of children's books in Spanish, so a lot of the literature that we have are written by these two ladies. A lot of the books that the kids are going to be reading, they'll be able to relate to because they talk about the Hispanic culture. Also, I want to talk about Dr. Elena Izquierdo. Dr. Elena Izquierdo is a wonderful woman. I know her personally because I have worked with her. So she is the leading dual language educator throughout the United States. So a lot of the things that we're going to be talking about today during our Arriba la Lectura came from Dr. Elena Izquierdo. Okay, so here we go. This is our teacher's guide, the dual language implementation guide. The great thing about this implementation guide, looking at it, it is written in Spanish, but for those of us, or those teachers that are a little, that need a little help with the language, they are on the sides of the teacher's guide. They are written in English. So if you find yourself teaching a class and you're doing the Spanish portion of your class, and you need to have a little guidance on what you're supposed to say, you kind of look at it as little translations for the teachers. That's a great feature about the teacher's guide. Okay, so I want you all to partner up, and I want you to take a look at some of these questions, and I want you to reflect on exactly what Arriba la Lectura provides for you. Let's take a look at these questions. How does Arriba la Lectura support your dual language biliteracy program? Okay. What recommendations are provided for collaborative planning and creating a bilingual learning environment? Review a week of instruction. What are the similarities between the Interreading and Arriba la Lectura lessons? What are the differences? All of you all who are dual language teachers know that there's a difference between learning to read in English and learning to read in Spanish. In English, we learn how to read using sight words. In Spanish, you learn syllabically. Okay, so syllabically. So you're going to learn a lot of the tito, ti, ta, is a lot of the stuff that you're going to learn during Arriba la Lectura. So you're going to learn first the syllable, and then instead of learning the letter, you're going to learn how the syllable works. Then how does this planning template help create a bridge between Interreading and Arriba la Lectura? So I want you all to take a minute, go to your PLG on pages 101, and I want you to reflect on how do you feel these four questions deal with Arriba la Lectura. Okay, it looks like you all are finished. Thank you very much. So let's take a look. Does anybody want to share comparing the Arriba la Lectura into Interreading? Can anybody tell me? Let's see, review a week of instruction. What are the similarities between Interreading and Arriba la Lectura?
It's written in Spanish.
It is written in Spanish. Very good. Okay.
And the text is authentic Spanish text.
The text is authentic Spanish
translated.
text, and the reason why is, like I said, it was written in collaboration with Dr. Elena Izquierdo, and she's been in the classroom. She knows what it's like to teach dual language learners. Okay, dual language settings. What are the 3 different types of dual language setting supports? Now, how many of you all, what are your ways of teaching dual language? We have the 50-50 model. How many of you all are 50-50 model teachers? Okay, great. It looks like the majority of you all are 50-50 model teachers. So that means you have a schedule. You're going to make your schedule. You will be teaching English, the English component. That's the great thing about Interreading. You can take both of those those guides together. In English, one day you will do the English model into reading. The next day, you will do the second day of your lesson, and then that'll be done in Spanish. And the great thing about that is students can relate to what they learned the day before, and it's the same module, the same topic, and they're just learning about it again, but in the second language. So if you're a 50-50 dual language teacher, this is where it's going to really, really make sense to the kids, because on Monday, they learned this story in English. On Tuesday, they're going to reflect back on the story that they read the day before, but then it's going to be in Spanish, and they're going to be making those connections. Okay? Now, let's take a look at exploring the Hispanic literature. Let me tell you something about this. The literature that is given to us through interreading Arriba la Lectura is authentic Spanish literature. And I know this because I am a librarian, and I come from a library where most of my teachers, most of my students were looking for authentic Spanish literature. And the great thing about it is having Ama Flor and Isabel Campoy writing these stories that the kids can relate to. Okay, so these are a lot of stories, super libro de rimas. Now, rhymes in Spanish are a lot different than the rhymes in English. Sometimes when you have a word in English, it's not really the same as it is in Spanish. So when you have this authentic Spanish literature, the kids understand. There's certain sayings, certain rhymes that they may have learned in Spanish, but don't know about in English. Let me tell you a story. I was reading to kids in my library, and I was trying to teach them rhymes in English, and they had never heard them before. But the minute I switched over and we started doing the rhymes in Spanish, they knew exactly what I was talking about. So exploring Hispanic literature for your Spanish-speaking students, this stuff they'll be able to relate to it. They can look at those pictures, even maybe even look at the pictures and feel that they have that background knowledge. Okay, so developing foundational skills. What I talked about earlier was that when you learn the English language, you learn the sounds and you look at the letters. But in Spanish, when you learn the foundational skills, you use the syllables. Okay, so in English, we have 44 phonemes. In Spanish, we don't have that many. In Spanish, the A is the A, the E is the E, and we know that. But in English, the letter A has 3 sounds. So when you're learning, especially when you have those of you all who are 50-50, and you have your English speakers that want to learn Spanish, and I've done this because I've been a 50-50 dual language teacher, and I know that my English speakers, it's always, believe it or not, easier for them to learn how to speak Spanish because there's not very many sounds in the alphabet. So that's the difference. Okay, we do, like I said, interreading Texas and Arriba la Lectura, they have the same materials, okay, they're parallel, except you can't be teaching Spanish the way you speak English because it's totally different. You learn how to read in English through sight words, right? You do sight words, sight words, sight words. In Spanish, it's very easy. You just read, it has it. They're the syllables, and we all know this being dual language teachers. So that's the great thing about Arriba la Lectura. Instead of just translating the interreading Texas, it actually has its own unique way of teaching the Spanish speakers. Now, how does Arriba la Lectura material support your biliteracy program? I want you to take a look and reflect on that question. How does Arriba la Lectura material support your biliteracy program? Up until this point, being a teacher, you probably did not have those materials that related to the kids, that actually focused on the knowledge, skills that you learned Spanish through. So I want you all to take a look at that. And what do you think? How can you answer that question? How do Arriba la Lectura materials support your biliteracy program? Okay, great. I like that answer. Exactly, right? You have authentic materials that your Spanish speakers can relate to.